Hello?
Yeah, it looks like we've
We got
been,
knocked out.
yeah, we're knocked out.
You
No, no
muted the
respect.
meeting. The meeting is muted on Zoom.
Why?
Because people are interrupting, that's why.
Stop interrupting.
But we should be able to hear, no? Even if we're muted?
They kicked us out because people
Yeah,
keep
so like I
interrupting.
had said, is so I can't count on bedroom count as an accurate data point, so I can't wait.
But when you're doing MLS, so you're doing it basically.
I'm looking at the exact home that's sold. I'm looking at the address and I'm looking at how it was listed and looking at the photos.
Brand you just built, it's a brand new.
Yep, so if it's still gonna get listed and
How
sold.
are you comparing that to other houses?
So that home is gonna receive 1% depreciation because it's brand new. So it's gonna be
But I mean,
in.
you're just going up to the house and going, this house is worth 500,000.
No, not at all, because if I was doing that, I would have done this in 3 months. We were here for almost 2 years.
No,
So, yeah.
I'm just saying, maybe this will answer the people's question. What are you doing if it's a brand new house? How are you basing that?
The brand new house will be worth more. The brand new house will be worth more.
No, I understand that, but what are you basing it on? Sales from other houses that size, and then you go get some rentals, it's a little bit more. I get that. My bedroom count is off in property.
Yep,
So now I'm coming to you saying it's not 3 bedroom, it's 2.
yep.
So the comp the value should lower because it's not a 3 bedroom. You're comparing the sale of a 3 bedroom.
So, and I'm telling you that our direct units of comparison that are weighed, that actually are gonna show you the difference of that value, are the quality grade of the home. So is it a C grade home? Is it a C minus? Is it a C plus plus? Is it B plus, A, double A?
Sure.
Right? And then the age of it, right? Was it built in 1810 or was it built yesterday? That's gonna determine your value far more than 3 bedrooms to 2. And then again, I'll say again, I cannot count on that data, so I don't weigh it. So it's gonna be grade of home, age of home and its condition, so depreciation, and then your overall location, which is gonna set your base land values. Those are the 4 direct units of comparison you want to be looking at the most to really, really piece out your equity, your parity, assessment to assessment. And then also when you go out and look at the sale comps of all the sales that were used out on the website. All right, I'm sorry, I'm gonna take 2 more questions from the floor and then I'm gonna move to Zoom. Yeah.
I know we talked about land value before, but back. You had the base price here for square footage for like interior. You were kind of referencing in the last thing. That felt like what how are you figuring out value by acreage? Is there like a base price you're starting with? Is it based off of is it usable like farmland? It's like what's calculating that land?
Yes, no, great question. So the question was about land value of residential properties, in excess of land value. So I'll explain that. So your first 2 acres is your statutorily required house site value set by the state of Illinois. So I have to separate out 2 acres. Your first acre 1, is going to be the most highly valued acre you have because that's where we're valuing all of your site utilities. So your septic, your well, your driveway, your electricity, all is to make into the value of that first acre, as well as the same location. So that's why 1 acre over the amount is $1 million, and 1 acre out here is $100,000. So that's your house site. Excess acreage, we're starting, and I believe we'll have a land schedule at the informal, it might be on the website too. We were starting like $4,000 for each excess acreage passed to. And then there's gonna be a standard size of like 5 acres, so your first 5 acres are worth $4,000. Each subsequent acre after that is worth less than the acre ahead of it. So we're valuing it on a depreciated curve. So your 1,000 acre will be valued at like $1,800, where your 3rd acre will be valued at $4,000. And each acre in between is worth less than the acre ahead of it, and that's how we account for economies of scale. right? If I buy in bulk, I'm gonna pay less per unit. So, and then we can make a million adjustments for land, right? So, and I'll also say this with Act 181 and everything that's going on around the legislature. Excess acreage is valued based on your ability to use it and enjoy it. I cannot say that your excess 100 acres is a subdivision, or could be, you could put 50 houses on it. Because you have taken zero legal steps to make that possible. You have to go through zoning, potentially Act 250, might have to go through environmental court. It might be $500,000 before you can look the first, greater, first bucket on the site. That's why we have the instructions. So everybody that thinks Act 181 is going to decimate grade list value because excess acreage is going to go from being valuable to zero. That would only be if I'm valuing your ability to develop it, which means, think about the hats I would have to wear to make that claim. I'd have to be your septic engineer, I'd have to be your local zoning, I'd have to be your surveyor. I then have to be with all the representatives of the state you have to go through. I can't make that call. So again, excess acreage, use and enjoyment, we can make a lot of adjustments for characteristics of topography. Or if you got to rappel down to your Act 50, we want to make an adjustment on it. Right?
What's that? So if you guys, I love it.
No, that's fine.
Why was that taken into consideration, the amount of profit? You guys would walk around the property, so you technically at that time would go see that acreage behind your house. You can't use it, right?
Yeah,
So,
so when our data collectors are walking around the house, they're looking at their topography for the house. Right, excess acreage, if you have 500 acres, man, we can't block the perimeter on that, obviously, so that I look at. All the tax maps, topography maps, I look at flood maps, all the above, try to do the best I can, but then again, we're gonna have this process, they're gonna come to me and say. Oh, well, here, back is 20 acres, I could never perk, it's back, I can't even mow it. The 40 acres down here is, I can't even get a skidder down there, and even log it, these are all the things we're gonna hear. And then we're gonna make adjustments for these characteristics. So I try my best to make these adjustments ahead of time. But I'm not perfect, so that's why I want to get the.
okay.
Yeah, well, yeah,
That's fine.
yeah.
So when you get that information from everybody, are you gonna create like a new, let's call it sliding scale that everyone will fall under based off of this, gather all this data and say, okay, this is how the sliding scale from that excess acreage downward based off of maybe usable versus not usable?
Yeah, so the question is if we're gonna change like the base land schedule to satisfy these characteristics. The answer is no, we're not gonna change the schedule for everybody because the schedule is made to work for the average. Everything we do is made to work for the average. And then we make adjustments for things that are outside of the average. So we'll make specific adjustments to each property that are specific to that property's characteristics.
Thank you.
First, that you include all the infrastructure.
First acre includes all of that, and if you don't have water, -10. You have water, you have sewer, again, like I said, so we make adjustments for what you may or may not have. One more question from the floor, right here.
Yes, we were not available for a large period of time when you were doing the inspections. And someone told us, well, you made the wrong decision in not letting them in because they tend to pad if you don't let them in. So my next question then is, since you can't come now to see our homes, what kinds of pictures do you want us to bring?
Yeah, so the question was, if we don't get inside of properties, we typically have the value or estimate on the high end. And what photos to bring, so the photos to bring simply are kitchens, baths, basements, I don't need to see your closets, I don't need to see your bedrooms. Okay, if you have like an exterior screen porch and it's ripping away from the house, yeah, I wanna see that. If you have, 3 sump pumps in your basement, yeah, I wanna see that. But I do not need to see every corner of the house. And I'll also say this, when I get a picture of your basement, if you have the wide angle lens, the 0.5 on the new iPhones, hit that wide angle lens so I can see the whole thing. If I get a zoomed in picture of a 3-inch crack on a piece of concrete, man, there's not much I can do with that. I get you have a crack, but I'd like to see the whole basement. So So we're gonna be very conscious of what we call selective photography, and we're gonna say, I'm sorry, thank you for bringing photos, but unfortunately, there's not much I can do with that because you gave me a photo of 4 inches of your kitchen countertop. I needed your kitchen. Right? All right, we gotta go to Zoom or else I'm.
So the first question was if my property assessment doubled. Or triple, whatever,
Yeah.
does that mean my taxes are gonna go?
Yep, so the first question was about percentage change in your assessment versus percentage change in your tax bill. So your tax bill will not change a percentage change in your assessment, so very simply put, values go up, rates come down, right? So your municipal tax rate, that's gonna be pretty easy, once we get through your grievance process, you set your budget in March. We're gonna get through the grievance process, we're gonna add the utility value, we're gonna add the value for amount of snow. Right, and then we're gonna have your post grievance grand list value, we'll be able to calculate your municipal tax rate, no plus, no loss. It's like 15% of what we all pay. So the education portion of your bill, right now, then attention legislature is still in session. The governor said, he said 6 months ago, and I'd like to see what he's sticking to his word, he's keeping them there between $350,000 a week. But they need to make some hard decisions. They were talking between 7% and 3% increase to the base education rate this year. It's looking like what's written but not sealed and signed is that they're gonna use $100 million of surplus funds to buy 7 down to 3. So we basically get 3% increase to the base ed rate this year. I think that's likely, but again, it's not signed and sealed by the governor, the budget, the state budget has to pass. So that's where we get this big variable where I like to be able to put out a tax calculator, which we very readily can do elsewhere. I can't do it. Because a tax calculator is only good if I can be within 3.5%. If I think my level of validity is gonna be 7% or more, because the variables that I need to make that calculation are so obscure, and they could be one way or the other. Putting a tax calculator out when we do these processes actually does damage. Because I'm giving you an estimate that is too far from what reality could be. And that's because the variance in our variables that come up with that tax rate are too unknown. So we've only ever implemented it accurately, and it was one time, it was endorsed in Vermont 2 years ago. Ron Gianni, I'll give him a shout out, he is an amazing town manager. He is very involved with state legislation and the school board. And his house, man, it is tiny, you should go see the town hall. It is amazing, it's a model for the rest of the state. We were able to do that there because Ron Gianni could do it. And he's an anomaly. I don't have, and he pushed for it, and he's the town manager, he's the boss, but again, we just can't put that out there, but simply put. The increase in your tax bill or change to your tax bill is not in any way directly tied to the change in your assessment. What it is, what the best indicator though is average percentage change. So right now, the average is plus 72%, the grand list. So whether or not your property value went up more or less than that percentage is the first indication that you have whether or not your taxes will go up or down. So if you went up 20% and the average is 72, the reappraisal was for you. You will see tax relief. You were being overtaxed by the CLA. Right, CLA was gonna add 40 points this year to everybody's tax bill, have we not individually equalized everybody's assessment. Right, so when we do reappraisal, we get rid of the CLA, that blanket adjustment that the state uses in the tweak reappraisal to affect everybody's value. By changing each assessed value individually throughout town. Now that CLA goes back to 100. The state is no longer just saying everybody pays 40% more, because some had to go up 300%. And some had to go up 20% or down 5%. So if your value went down or your value went up far less than the average. This is why the CLA is regressive, right? Meaning that a blanket adjustment in that manner, it benefits the higher value properties by not increasing them enough. And it punishes the lower value properties by increasing them too much. Right, so that's why we do reappraisal, is to create equity amongst all the taxpayers in town. So, long answer, but that's what it is. Next on Zoom,
Well, we have an issue with Zoom, they don't have chat.
I'm pretty sure Zoom is built.
Yeah, we haven't been able to put in any
We
chat
haven't
questions.
been able to have it.
We have a question.
Okay, so then I'll ask if everybody in the room be quiet so I can get questions coming from Zoom.
Right.
Okay. We have a question.
Yeah,
Our property was built in 2018. So, and we were assessed then. So now I guess how is that calculation typically done now on a newer property? And we did do the inspection as well. And ours went up 120%.
yeah, so I touched on this a bit earlier, so when your building was built in 2018. The system, the database that it was valued in was still set as of 2010. So all the square foot price and everything that was your initial new construction assessment was already undervalued for what it was worth today. And what we're doing is saying, what is it worth today based on the last 3 years of sales? So that's something where it's hard for me to speak to your prior assessment in any regard, and I was never used as a benchmark for where your new assessment should be. But the biggest reason why you're feeling like you've been double dipped, I guess is the best thing to say, is because your 2018 value was really a 2010.
Okay, another quick question about the impact of radon in the area. I know there's quite a bit and we see it in the paper as well.
And we have.
How did that factor into some of these evaluations?
Sure, so radon, you gotta bring your paperwork. If you have really bad radon in your basement, you have paperwork to signify that you do. Email it to me or send it to, or bring it to the informational hearing.
Yeah, we put in an $8,000 system to get rid of it.
Yes. Yep.
I have another question on Zoom, if I might. I thank you for all the information you posted on the website. It was really helpful. I looked through all the documents, but that said, I didn't understand a lot of them because they appear to be outputs from, a regression analysis. So if you could just please introduce your documents better on your website, tell us how they were generated. And there are a lot of acronyms. If you could just add a key so we understand what all those acronyms are. And similarly, on the cards I got from the property card we got from Linda, it has also a lot of new acronyms. And she said to ask you about those. For example, there's a floor plan sketch with a lot of acronyms I don't understand. And then there's a lot of different ratings on qualities of bathrooms I don't understand. So a lot of that I'd like to check for accuracy, but I can't do that without more information. And lastly, on your neighborhoods, I'm really interested in how you mapped the neighborhoods because our homes don't fit easily in any neighborhood. And so if you could please publish a map that shows where the neighborhood boundaries are, that would really help. And then also one last thing, sorry, but I'd like to check the comps and I see your database, which is helpful, but if there's any way you can publish that database searched by housing type, like Cape or Colonial. I'm trying to find comps, but there's so few of those. It's really takes me a lot of time to punch through all the hyperlinks for all the different things.
These are the comp.
So thank you. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so I'll respond to that. So come to the, so definitely get on the phone with us, have an informational hearing, and we will explain the card, it's time and any other questions that you have. The acronyms, it's part of it. I look to put a template out there, like SFL second floor, FFL's first floor, BMT's basement. They're definitely mapped to, definitely we try to map them to common sense as best we can. The neighborhood map, I would love to be able to do that too. But unfortunately, because of limitations with our tax deducting software due to state statute not equaling reality, where we have to combine contiguous parcels, I can't even do spatial mapping when I'm setting it. And I wish I could, but I could in other states. But I can definitely talk to you about neighborhood delineations. And we can go over that as well, and that's not, that's an in-depth conversation. I think I got the majority of it, but I think the overall theme of your question is, you need to get time to come speak with us.
Yes, I have a question. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Rusty.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess I have two questions. First, if you want photographs, for those of us who are located out of town, how could we get those photographs to you for consideration as part of this informal consideration process and other materials in color?
Yeah, you can email us, so on that notice, there's an email address to, your town assessor.
Okay.
And I will be going through all those email submissions. So any photos that have those attachments, any argument you have or opinion of value, put in the body of the email. But I will say this, there will be no back and forth correspondence via email, like I would want to answer questions, via email. So just put your argument, what you feel your value should be, when you feel like incorrect, the photos. And I will be reviewing that, along with the rest of everybody that's coming in person.
Okay, thank you. And don't waste your time with this informal process. Would you consider evidence of comparable sales within the last 2 years of the same type and floor plan and exterior visual appearance?
100%, yes.
Okay, as well as current listings of properties of the same type in visual appearance and floor plan that are substantially below your proposed assessment to show market trends?
Yep, no, that's exactly the conversation we want to be having. You know, and I just say, if you look at this price, if I don't hang my hat on it. You know, and just to show you, so you may have lesser listings and higher values, just as Suntech has. Lower assessments right now, but higher listing prices, even with all the considerations I'm being asked to make. So, you know, it's something where we gotta look at it with a grain of salt, but yes, we absolutely consider it as like a position of an opinion, of an argument. But I can't hang my hat on this price because it's not always gonna really paint anywhere near a picture of reality.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. 3, 2, 2.
Yeah, I recently purchased a condo at Green Springs in October for 420,000, and I'm assessed at 619. How does that work?
Okay, so yeah, come in, we wanna take a look at that, and did you update the unit post sale or no?
It's a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath.
Sure,
Original.
so I'm gonna move on because so come to the informal, I just can't speak intelligently to you about your property, seeing as I have no idea what it is. Who's Lucia?
Yeah, hi. I have two questions, one logistical and one actually about the software and the model. I did a quick analysis looking through your all sales report. I was looking at a few MBCs. I wanted to ask about the systemic equity of the software and how you're calculating it. Because when I'm looking through the MBC for my particular property, it seems as if the larger and more pricier properties at the stairs compared to our sales price seems to be more undervalued. So their ratio that versus your appraisal was about 0.7 to 0.9, whereas the smaller properties were above 1. So how is the system and or maybe your team, et cetera, outside of the software taking into account the actual equity here, right? And the actual utility, because larger properties should have higher value, and they do market-wise, than smaller properties.
Yeah, so when that's what you're trying to do is gauge equity based on percent of change, and that's not gonna be your best gauge of equity. To gauge equity, you wanna look at current assessment to current assessment. So the reason being is that we have no real indication as to how the old values were set. And there also were, trends, market trends back in 2010. So that is something I also noticed, that larger tracts of land and bigger properties were already valued pretty well, like comparative to everything that went up 97%. So they didn't have to travel as far to get to current market. That doesn't mean it's not equitable. So, for example, all commercial property right now increased like 50%, a lot less. That's a reaction to what the current market trends are for commercial property. It's hard to travel up there. This is incredibly, seasonal market. I mean, everyone knows the challenges. So the gauge of equity should be current assessment versus current assessment of like properties, and try to avoid percent of change because it can be a bit misleading if you're trying to gauge equity based on.
But sorry, one follow-up question on that then is, but then how would you justify this calculation from either the software or the firm, your appraisal firm here, justifying this calculation that discounts premium properties on a per square foot value, right? So this, I'm comparing the cost of value per square foot and penalizing smaller size properties in the same grade, because as you mentioned, it's the exact grade and actually in the same year, in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, so what you discovered is our size adjustment. So just like when I was talking about excess acreage or one or number economies of scale, we base our size adjustment on the average size of a home in your community. I won't quote it because I can't remember it in all my towns. That is a for the size adjustment. If your house size is around the average, that's a factor of 1. If your house is 20% below the average size, there's going to be a positive factor that increase the base price per square foot. Right, that's based on size. So you have less, each square foot is going to be worth a little bit more. Just as if you have 10,000 square feet, we can't value that square foot pound for pound for every square foot because it's going to blow values out of the water. So what you deciphered is our size adjustment that does create differences in base square foot price depending on how large or what size your subject property is in relation to the average in town. And I think here it's gonna, again, I'll be able to get this number, at least from like 3,000 square feet if I have to, as far as like the average size of the whole 4,800 and stuff.
Okay, so I appreciate this clarification. I don't want to belabor this further. Is this when you mentioned earlier to someone else's question, we can send comparable sales of units to you guys. Is the email the assessor at Dover, Vermont, the email that we emailed Linda to with the photos and our arguments in preparation for the informal hearing?
Absolutely, yeah. If you have direct sale comps, please, that's what you're talking about. That's what we want to look at.
Yeah, the direct sales comp for it is about 30% less than the value that this was had. So I was thinking there was an inherent bias in that system that penalizes the smaller units.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Looks like Kathy.
Hello. Oh, did you just call on me?
Yes, Kathy.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I have 2 things. One is simpler, I think, building on Rusty's mention of those that are not here. So if we're not going to be up in this next week to 2 weeks to take pictures for you, what's the alternative?
No, I don't know if you have anyone in the area that would do that for you. You can still submit a submission and I'll still review your property. But then I'll also say that this is by no means the end of the road as far as the agreement process, so you will still have full agreements process available to you. Probably looking like the 3rd week of June, something like that. So we're gonna file your abstract by June 4th. And then we'll be sending out formal change proposal notice letters, which will be reflections of the informal hearing. The changes that we make at that level will be reflected in that notice. And that notice will also give you directions, the dates and times, so the formal readings is being held.
Okay. We'll figure that out. Thank you. The more important question, so I should have led with it. We're in a condo community, Bears Crossing condo. I've looked at property records of every other condo. Every other condo is assessed at 334 and we're assessed at 417,000. And the only thing that I can find that looks different is the grading is written a slightly different way. Now, you said the grading's about the building. We're in a townhome, same building. So I guess why I really would like to kind of like not even deal with grieving and like phone calls. Can you guys just take a review? This appears to be an error, an obvious error in our building assessment.
Yeah, you gotta send me something so I know where you are. There will be a difference in value between townhouses and barn styles. Barn styles are in flats, they're gonna be just a single floor.
It's the same building. It's all the condos in the same building. And I have gone back and forth with Linda. I should get your contact info?
Yeah. No, so then we also make adjustment for end units versus interior units. But again, like, submit your card, your query, and I will review it.
Okay, submit my what? I missed that, sorry.
Just submit your location, your unit number, your parcel ID, and your questions and your argument, and I will review it.
5 of the 6 are being priced.
And I'm sending that to who?
The email address is in the letter that was sent to you.
Okay, that same one. Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. Jeff.
Hello. I'm along the same lines as Lucia, smaller unit. And I've reviewed 2 years of comps and there's not one that comes close. So I've already submitted to Vermont Assess to the email the 8 comps I have over 2 years. I didn't go back 3 years. I know your period is April 2023, April 2026. You're gonna have eight comps that I looked at. And I just want to make sure you mentioned things like number of bedrooms don't count in the assessment. So I assume you're just looking at square foot. But if you look at comps, and if that's what you used to make the comps, a 3-bedroom condo comp is way different than a 1-bedroom condo comp.
Yep. So there also would probably be the 1-bedroom might be 650 feet to 900 square feet, and the 3-bedroom would be 1,600 square foot. So that's going to be the direction of comparison that we're going to use with that, as well with condos. So again, just to elaborate, we make adjustments for end units, we make adjustments for basement units. There's going to be an adjustment for a townhouse versus a flat. There's going to be different, and obviously, I think you all are doing this. Only compare within your HOA, because we treat every condominium complex like its own little town. Thank you for submitting. You were doing the homework, and like I said, we're going to be reviewing a lot of condominiums because I'll make no bones about it. I'm probably a little blind up there, so we want to get as much information as we can at this stage.
Right, and look, I understand we've probably been under assessed for a bit, but it's very disheartening when a town comes in and appears to be purposely over assessing to make up for past problems.
Well, so I urge you to read that understanding your assessment document, especially the portion that says this is not a cash grab. The town can only collect as much money as is voted into the budget annually, it's illegal for them to collect the time more. So the municipality is not doing this as like some get rich quick scheme or to, overcome some, past, digressions of financial situations. All we're doing is equalizing taxation through fair market assessments. And the longer a town goes without doing a reappraisal, the bigger the changes will be. One thing the state has done to their credit to counteract this is that statutorily towns must reappraise every 6 years now. So the interval will be less, the amount of change will be less, tax rates will be more stable, assessments will be more stable, right? So that's what we're after. So here's the flip side, right? Vermont's real estate market has appreciated over 100% in 5 years. Can it go down just as fast? And then we'll be cutting your values in half in 6 years, but your tax rate will double. Right, so again, we are only a mirror that mirrors back reality. Reality is created in the market through fair market transactions, automatic transactions. I do not conduct these transactions, nor do I benefit from them or have any involvement with them. All I do is analyze them, look at what is factual, and then render assessments comparatively throughout the town, in those ways. And that's why, so everybody's looking at comps and if you the fee appraisals, with mastery appraisal, it's a lot different from just a mega appraisal where the assessment, the appraiser is looking at one property and only value that one property. I have to value the entire town. So the software we use, obviously we have different methodologies in order to accomplish that, which is why I put all those qualified sales up on the website, because those sales, that is, so if when the state goes to validate the project, if IAO is going to say your project is within statistical compliance, they are going to print a slew of those reports. And they're going to look at my medians, they're going to look at my PRDs, my coefficient of dispersion, all my stats. And in that document by ABC, all the stats that we plot on of every neighborhood shows that statistically within that class of property, we are in statistical compliance, current assessment versus sale price for everyone. We calibrate the database to satisfy those sale properties. The data that translates through to those values that translate through the rest of the database to value properties that haven't sold. So, but I will say, if we get to a further level of field, there will be a myopic view of just the one appellate subject property and 6 comparables and direct market analysis with direct adjustments. And I will look at your property as set Board of Local Authority level. I will look at your property as a fee appraiser, and I will be looking at fair market value for one Main Street and one Main Street only. Right now, I'm looking holistically at 3,400 parcels and valuing that holistically. So again, this database, it is not to be put in the drawer and not taken out again. You have to maintain this year in and out, and that's where I hope that a lot of HOAs potentially will set a conversation. I would definitely be available to any HOA committee for any information or questions that you can get, information on mass. That's great, but to make really hard decisions and have the conversation as to how far off do we think all of our assessments are, how inequitable do we think they all are, and is it beneficial to us to cooperate with the community and maybe even instigate or even come and say, hey, get these guys back, we want to go through every single unit. If you can get your HOA to say that we're going to go through all 300 names of that base friends, I'll come and do it. But I hope it would be, you would renew the optimism in my heart if that happened.
Brian?
Fair enough.
Could you maybe go back, like, with dwellings and talk about how the different grades work? And is it a matter of opinion to say, well, my place is really good, but you just pass it?
Well, yeah, so I mean, so the question about building grades and interior grades, so yeah, obviously that's a bit subjective. But we're all very consistent, that's all, when we talk shop, we talk about kitchens, baths, flooring, heating pipes. What this walkout piece would look like, what the other did, so we have a lot of group meetings where all of us, all of our data collectors. We calibrate to what we're looking at and how we're grading and how we're putting data in so that we do it as consistently as possible. Exactly, normalize it, right? So, but here's the thing, so remastery appraisal is like a funnel. At the top, we're really kind of circling around, we don't really know, all right, we're getting there. When we get down to the neck of the funnel, that's when I do. And now I start sifting, I do my final review where I go to every single property. And I will calibrate the grade, the condition, the depreciation, everything to me. So the amount of red ink, I kind of made a little bit of joke and probably not well advised to say this here, but I mean, I went through an entire red pen in my review, man. I literally, an entire red pen's worth of thing. In 10 days, it took me 10.5 days to visit every single property in town. So I make a lot of adjustments in review that then we get the values really into the neck of that funnel, and that's where we're rendering preliminary values. Now going through the informal process, we're even tighter to the very bottom, and that's when we're gonna present the town with this abstract grand list. And then they will go through their formal previous process and dig down deeper and deeper and deeper. So, but again, doing this every 6 years or in a shorter increment, the 6 years, it's not enough of us to involve. But still limiting the increment, less change. But yes, there are a lot of, we have a lot of controls, as to equity of data points and building construction styles, and I, at the end of the day, I've said it all, so.
If you were only using that plan, is that mean the assessor didn't do a great job?
No, I would say they did a really good job. I did go through 2 red pens.
Oh, I average is 2 or 3.
Well, again, so, but so a scratch job, right? The scratch job, you start with the widest funnel, right? So that's where it's like, we gotta narrow down. If I were to do a review again, it'd be maybe a quarter. Right? Do we have one more in the chat, but I'll go back to the one. Jared?
Hey. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I just had a question about the education rate set by the state. Are other towns doing this kind of thing? And if so, are they also seeing huge increases in property value, which would potentially result in a lower state rate? Or are we kind of the only ones and we're going to be stuck with this high education rate?
Awesome question. Thank you for asking that. So yes, no, I asked that question to our state senators and our state leadership often. So on average, all of us vendors throughout the state of Vermont, we accomplish between 24 to 30 reappraisals a year. So that's each town. AMC, my partner this year, we're turning 7 communities for reappraisal. But it is true, and that's what the state is really trying to hammer down with, is statewide equity. So we're getting there, we're trying to do as much as we can. Okay, so, but the heart of your question, which I ask all the time is, we had just under $1 billion to go for his grand list. You guys know, like 960 million, something like that. Ludlow went up $1 billion, about 980 million in Ludlow. Even like our little other towns, they're going up, tens of millions of dollars. So I pose this question often and I never get an answer. If the statewide grand list is going up by 10 to 20 billion a year, why is the state base rate still increasing? And then I follow that up with, if we weren't adding $20 billion a year to the state grand list, does that mean the increase would be 15%? Right? So there's it's going on with the state value, the state block, to pull this taxation on them. And you really get a non-answer. You get the yes, I think so. But the reality of it is that there's a handful of people in the state that understand the state's taxation algorithm. So those are problems that are definitely being voiced at the state level very strongly. If you notice, the governor is really, this is the most stern I've seen our governor I think ever be, where he's put his foot down. He said, "You're not leaving until you do something. You do something to change something." So yeah, no. So as we get on a 6-year cycle, we're able to commit 2 more towns so that every town is up to fair market value. But also in between, remember that all these towns are also being adjusted by the CLA, the Common Level Appraisal of the state. So there are some communities that the state is adding 60-70% every assessment and then applying the education rate to that because their values are so starkly low and it's been so long since they've done the reappraisal. Again, that's regressive, it's not adequate. But the state is trying to make sure that they maintain equity town to town as best they can. But that is a question, if you have any inroads to the state senators or any representatives, that's the question I ask is, we're in a greatly appreciated market. Over the last 5 years, those state education rates increased 42%. If it goes up 3% this year, it'll be 45% over 6 years. I consider that a runaway train. But also during this time, remember, we've been adding tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars to the statewide grant list, yet the rates are still increasing. So it's more of an illustration, I think, of how really awry we are, up at our state government. And it is very impactful. It's 85% of what we all pay is very impactful. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so related to that, that was gonna be my original question, so, yeah, while it's all equal. Kind of at the town level. The whole issue is the state. The fact that we pay, that we're going up on average 90%, okay? CLA, so on average, everyone in this town is. Dover is gonna send, it's a huge windfall, this process, the state is the bottom line, okay? It all equals out, my neighbor pays a little more or less on the town, and I don't think anyone, town does a great job with the road, so, well, all good on the town side, so being honest, our whole issue is, we talk about fairness, but on average, we as a town are gonna pay more because our percentage is more than what the CLA was.
If you're valid, yeah, if you're
All
valid.
right, I'm just,
Yes, no,
picture average, okay, so the average house from this town is now gonna be sending more to the state than they were before. Okay, it is what it is, however, my real question is. I feel that looking at the data. And I think you guys did overall a very scientific job. But it seems like the COVID real estate high kind of ended 18 months ago. And, when I look at properties that have transacted in the last 12 months, a few of those I know where they were a few years ago when I was looking at properties, and most of the ones that I've looked at are down a bit, where they sold in the last 6 months versus where I know they were listed before. And so my biggest concern is, since we collectively are paying more to the town, to the state, then if the high would sort of peaked at the high already kind of happened, and yet you're using this 3-year window. Okay, I kind of feel like when we're saying our values are May or April of this year, that we're giving the state an extra little 5% kicker because we use this 3-year period, and as of this date, we're probably, tell me if I'm just totally wrong.
Yeah.
We're probably about 5% or so on average over value, because I think the curve sort of popped up.
Sure. No, I mean, so everything's obviously slowed down drastically. I mean, 3 years ago, you listed property on Friday, you have a festival over the weekend, and Monday night, you sit down with a bottle of wine and go over 25 homes. That is gone. That's gone.
But yet those are in the database.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they're statutorily required. So I say this all the time to people in the tax department and in our circles. If I have enough sales, I want to use the last 16 months. Right? Because the state tells me 2 things in statute. Fair market value as of April 1st of the year 2026, whatever it may be, but you must use 3 years of sales. And they do not allow for time adjustments. So in our analysis all the time, I can say this house sold in 2023, and it would have been X, it sold in 2026, it's Y. And I can show that in market analysis. I have to weigh every one of those sales the same. Right? which in an appreciating market will actually statistically tap values down a little bit.
Right.
And that's been, over the last 3 years, that's been the norm. When we get through a project, sales that happen over the summer, they're a little bit higher than what we just set them at, which statistically proves we're following market trends. I have seen it a bit too. I'll say this, the Dover real estate market, it was a challenge for me. You guys have some oddball, like weird sales out there and weird areas, and across the street, you'll have actual sales that completely contradict the other side of the street. Which I think is a challenge. But there are people here that I think definitely are like getting like, really, like they're not getting, COVID, right? They're getting a better deal, but then there are still those cash transactions that are at that same level. They're just happening less frequently than they take your typical, 40 to 60, 80 days to close. So, but in saying that, and your rationale and your thought process is exactly correct. What we can do, say the market tanks tomorrow, right? Say all of a sudden everything's worth half tomorrow. Within 3 years or a couple of years, we can do a statistical update to the entire town's database. If we would lower values, but if we lower values, rates just go up, right?
Well, again, but we realize 75% of this money is going to Montpelier.
Yeah,
right? So therefore, the rate really doesn't go up if you go adjust the CLA, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where I'm saying right now, we collectively are gonna be giving the state more than they're due, okay? Because as of this April, okay, I feel as though we already should be, again, not talking my property, just everybody in town. I think that your values, because you use that 3 years, are off by, not a lot, but as you said, normally your method is based on this 3% a year.
It's been like that year.
And now it's the other way. So how do we not, it's bad enough, it is what it is, but how do we not give the state even an extra thing? Like, how do we adjust?
So
talk to the real estate agents and say, no, as of May or April.
Yeah, so I get you, and I'm just, if the market softens and property starts selling less than what they're assessed for, the CLA will go above the country. So a CLA of 120 means the state takes 20% of your assessment away, and then applies the education rates at that value. So the CLA does go both ways, right? So, but if the CLA starts creeping 105, 110, 115, that's the indication that the town within 5 years. Within 5 years, we can still do a statistical reappraisal. We asked them today, I'd say I do it. In a year from now, legislation may change that. What it need from doing statistical reappraisals. The statistical reappraisal is about 40% of the cost. We don't knock on every door, but we do the sales analysis piece, we do the final review piece, we do the appeals piece, and we'll recalibrate values to that market. Basically in between two, what we would call full town line appraisals, where we knock on every door and recollect data and measure everything. So so typically when I do statistical reappraisals, I consider them their legacy databases, so they have 10+ years of maintenance. I know what's out there, I have robust zoning in these communities, so I know I'm not missing a house, I'm not missing additions, stuff like that. And then I can make those statistical adjustments to correct the CLA. But over 6 years, you probably will need another entire full reappraisal, or we can either talk about partial reappraisals for condos. But there are options to maintain this database after today, so that we maintain equity and stay accurate. And then the rest of your question, and this is where I'm pretty transparent, I'm pretty candid. This is where I start to struggle. Because the conversation that we're about to have, if we continue, it starts looking like I'm handing out pitchforks and torches. So I'm not quite there yet, right? So, but seriously, there are very serious questions to be asked of our local representation. And there are serious hardships that are being created based on decisions being made up in the state.
So, but we're gonna be at 100%. There's no way you can say because of the market, you should be at a CLA of 105.
No, because there haven't been enough sales that have occurred yet to even make that analysis.
How long does it say 100%?
So for a year, well, you'll have a temporary CLA of 100, and then in January, they're gonna recalculate the town CLA. Which may change a little bit, but it won't be really till the following year where your CLA will start to move based on that next year of sales. That the state will analyze.
Only 1 year, basically.
Basically 1 year.
And is the CLA adjustment applied only once it hits 15%, one way or the other, or all the way along?
All the way along,
line? And
yep.
then there is, so 15% of the 150% or 85% triggers a new reassessment, is that?
So
It happens before the 6
the
years.
coefficient of dispersion, yeah, so it's now, yeah, there is a trigger now for coefficient of dispersion, it's plus or minus 15%. That the state would order the town to do a reappraisal. It used to be the CLA plus or minus 20%. This coefficient of dispersion shows more about equity and your data. But yeah, no, it will change. So if your CLA is 98, they're adding 2%.
So if our CLA in 2 years is 117%, but we're sitting right back here in 2 years, right?
I would say that your best case would be 6 years from this. So your best case would be 2032, and depending on the environment, like so the state right now, everything with the Joe Mastery appraisal is there are about 2 House bills and 2 Senate bills that have all of our stuff in it. Where they're trying to regionalize, they're trying to say they want to say if I want to work in Dover, I have to work in every surrounding community. So legislation about this whole process is very much up in the air right now. But yes, the earliest would be 6 years, and if not, then we start to really say, hey, we probably need to address this, pretty readily after the 6 year mark. Yes, sir.
Arguing that producing this process versus. So you got different weightings for the house, the air down houses, our houses is the same. So, is for a specific property, is the rationale and the specific house you use for that property in the date that you have that property?
Yeah, no, it is not. So when we get to a level, we're going to use direct comparables and we're basically applying on one subject property to be forest of authority and beyond. Mastery appraisal, we use all the sales to calibrate our data points. That value then translates to a lot of properties, the similar data points, the value even though they have the same. So there, we don't go and say, here's your value, here are the 3 properties we looked at to set your value. We're in turn of using every value to set classes of properties, the values within all those things. So that's why I break it down by neighborhood, and then I also break down on the building. So that's why when you gauge your equity, you want to compare, a C grade home to a C grade home. Right? If you have an A grade home, you want to compare it to a C grade home, because you're going to go nuts. Right? But it's a C grade home, you have an A grade, right? But as far as when we come to the informational hearing, we will be able to go over, we'll be able to kind of cherry pick using scales that are possible to yours and share them with you, so that you can kind of get a better gauge as to bringing you value based on the sales, where you feel you're something.
We don't have the ability to receive specific information live in terms of specific.
There's
pricing that.
it is, there's all the qualified sales are on the website.
But you weigh that differently, you don't have the manual.
Yeah, no, and so I'll be able to show you
Is
that.
that more of a black box than this, you guys have?
So not in everything about us and public information, so, no, it's more just methodology, is that we're not the appraisers, we're not doing a bank appraisal on value of the entire community, so it's different methodologies that come to do that. So, but I can share with you sales that have occurred during the setup of the property, or even at value of the age of the property. So like I'll show you a sale here at 350, I'll show you a sale at 425, I'll show you a sale at 280. Say, hey, look at these 2 properties, do you feel that your property is in the, it shouldn't be in the building? Then I'll give you the distance from the lot and from the.
When looking at property, I've been looking like my house,
Yeah.
and the assessment is way higher than all the other ones, similar square footage. So I don't really know how to approach.
Yeah, so look for differences in your construction versus most of the companies eventually. So like, so,
Average,
Yeah.
you don't see,
Yeah.
it's it.
yeah, there's some around you with team. And so so that's why you can also look in similar neighborhoods, so like you're in R7 neighborhood or R6 neighborhood. You can look to another R6 neighborhood, that might be on the other side of Northern Road.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe more than a quarter mile.
And when I look at, the right neighborhood or something. 30 acres and two,
Yeah.
it's the same necessity.
Yep.
In my 3,000 square feet.
Yeah.
It's the same.
And so there may be individual, like I said, there may be individual adjustments on one property or the other. And I'd like to sit down on the local things and look at it, I can talk to myself about what I mean, the actually is. But the reason there would be a difference is because either there's something objectively different about your property than your dry neighbors, or there's just. So either way, we want. Right?
What the process from here to, but how long are we in this process to establish?
Yeah.
Is it nice?
Sure, yeah, so this formal process will start next Tuesday, we'll run through next Saturday. Thursday and Friday will be noon to 8 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday will be 9 to 5, Saturday will be 9 to 3. That will be, so you'll have all that opportunity to come out and talk to us. That's just the informational stage, that's the last part of the project that's really the company. So after that, NESC will then render the values back to the community, back to the town of Dover. But as we file your abstract grant list. Your abstract grant list will spark off the formal change from grant notices, so you'll get another letter. It'll be different from the one you just got, the same basic information. That will have your value, which may have been adjusted at the informal stage, right? So if you came to an informal, you get that formal notice. Any change in value is reflected in that new notice, and then it'll be just instructions and dates on the external of formal grievances. And I'll speak kind of loosely about that, they're looking to be like dates in June. But there'll be specific dates, in the notice as to when they comes on, and how to schedule on this. If you file a formal grievance, and you do not like the result of the formal grievance, you can then go to the Board of Civil Authority. The Board of Civil Authority is made up of justices of the peace within your community. They're just basically community arbiters, basically. They're community members that are out to do good and to do what's right. And they're gonna, it's mandatory that they walk through your home at that point. There's typically inspection committee of 3. There, you'll be able to offer an argument to the board. Linda and I will be basically presenting the argument as to what we feel the value is. And then you go through that Board of Civil Authority process. We cannot render a value at that point, the Board of Civil Authority renders the value as a result of that process. If you do not like the Board of Civil Authority's decision, you can then take one of 2 roads. You can go to a state property valuation review hearing officer, they're an employee of the state tax department, and they will hear your case and hear your argument and render a decision to what your value is, or you can go to Superior Court. And then. Yeah.
So the informal, that's at like 10-15 minutes, that was listed on our.
Yeah, I'll notice that you just, yeah.
And then who decides on the Board of Civil Authority?
Yeah, so those will be justice of the state of justice of the peace and your select board, so they're kind of like local leaders, local representation. And there, but invited, I'll be honest with you, they invited the best dentists in the world. I don't know if they know real estate, but they're on board. So, but that's why, so like tailor your presentation to more of like, hey, I'm just trying to really, I'm trying to really convey simple concepts of why I think my values online. I will say by that point that you're either at least at that point, there's either just an incredibly difference of opinion, and when we get to the BCA, that's when you see a little bit different me, where I'm like, all right, I gotta protect the grand list for everybody. So for frankly, like, so bad, right? Valley well stuff. You a lot of money, big piece of the grand list. If they don't go to court, you probably want to do that, you want to fight that, so you don't want, 20 million, 30 million, take off the grand list because then everybody else is attached to this. So, again, like we have all these steps, but when we get to those past approval to DCA the same hearing, that's when it's basically, here's the private right, that's the lot of what the value is. And I will say this, typically, but individual analysis, instead of regular value that was fine, potentially than what was previously. So there, that does happen, because now my methodology changes, right? I'm not looking at 3,400, I'm looking at one. That's kind of how the follow on believing steps.
But that's by 28. Those persons been told they by 28 that we participated in it.
Yeah, so yeah, just anything written to me. So anything you want to email needs to be by the 28th, because after that I have to be able to go through it so that I can get everything submitted on time. I think that's me. So there's a sample of the letter on the town website, that you can view. Yeah, if you go to town, you went to town hall. Yeah, they'd be able to facilitate that, and then we'll also get you a copy of your car, so you can see the value and all the data. So. So as soon as able, so I mean, that is, follow up as fast as you can, but yeah, I definitely, it just, I guess, follow up, if it's been a long time.
Who's the individual property part available?
So there's a WebPro database, and that's when you can go get, your card or anybody else's card. It is a bit watered down, but it does have all that information on there. It can request a PDF for one example. Yes.
Real quick, so you got like pictures and stuff that has to be in for the 28th, or we can bring that to the.
Yeah, so either bring it with you, even on like that Saturday, but if you're gonna email me anything, I need it by the 28th. Yeah. All right, how we feel?
I just want to congratulate you on your demeanor and intention, and I think you're gonna wonder.
Thank you all.
So I've got the notice in February, I was gonna click for this, and I did have an issue on it. Yeah. I know how the very when I got the house.
It's all my home.
Yeah, and I get my down and I repeat my kitchen by myself, so it's like, I'm not sure how I did it. So.
Well, I say, look at what the data type, like, maybe sleeves or some phrase. Yeah, so no, yeah, so obviously, it's something that
Hey, Ryan?
So we have a light.
And so look at
Ryan?
Okay, and I had to go. So my presenter.
Number on this call, will be appointed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's specific number, so we are. All my confidence.
Okay. Say hi.
It's never all.
Okay. Okay, I'll get on schedule, thank you.
Yeah.
Ryan?
I did.
Holy. I noticed that today.